I think the thing that's on the top of everybody's mind that it truly affects all of us, that's the cost of living and inflation. And yet the Liberals are hiking the carbon tax up to $40 a ton here in just 3 weeks from now. And it seems to me there's really only one politician doing something quite tangible about that here in Alberta. And I'm frequently a critic of Jason Kenney, but he has decided to stop the provincial portion, at least, of some of the taxes collected on the price per liter, because it's really the one thing that governments can do is they're taxing us. They're responsible for the tax. They can't change the market, but they can change the portion that they're taking. And yet we hear all the time Liberals talking about, the cost of fuel and how it's so outrageous. And Rachel Notley in Alberta talking about the cost of fuel and how the government has to do something. She brought in a carbon tax. It's right. Crazy.
Yeah. She brought in a carbon tax, and also she brought in the renewables policy, which is driving up costs astronomically across Alberta. And we warned people about that back in 2015. But nobody wanted to listen. They wanted to call us deniers or whatever. And there you have it. I think one thing that's very important is that I just found out the other day from this paper out of Switzerland and Canada, is that Canada and Switzerland are the only two countries in the world that have this carbon tax and dividend or rebate program. And this particular study looked at how the stupid peons don't realize that they're getting so much money back and they don't appreciate it. I mean, really, it's tax them and bribe them with your own money. But what happened in Switzerland is that they actually voted against an increase in the carbon tax, and they only get a discount on their healthcare costs. And in Canada, I asked Robert Lyman about this paper, and he said, really, there's so many layers of GHG reduction, taxes, incentives, subsidies, etc. The carbon tax makes up only a tiny portion of this huge burden of green debt that we're carting around on our backs that does nothing for the climate and nothing for the environment in most cases.
Yeah. And you have a really great video actually on the Friends of Science YouTube page, which is phenomenal. You guys take these big, huge issues and break them down into tiny bits that normal people can digest in language normal people understand, because I think some of the things that the environmentalists do is they try to sound a lot smarter than they are, and they sort of obfuscate the real issues with big words and jargon. But the fact that the media refuses to make the connection between green energy policies and carbon taxes with the cost of living. They refuse to acknowledge that the carbon tax is built in along the entire supply chain and compounded over and over again, so that when you get your jug of milk in the grocery store and you say, this is 25% more expensive than it was just a few short months ago, the media never acknowledges that in any of their reporting.
Yeah, we've got a short video on that which I call carbon taxophobia, because the media is suffering from this phobia of they can't mention the carbon tax for some reason. And, people are always told, well, it's just, a few pennies per liter at the pump. But, that few pennies per liter is at the pump. It's also at the farmer's farm where he or she has to, plant and harvest all this equipment, all this food for us, has to ship it. It has to be processed. It has to be packaged all the way along the line. These carbon taxes are cumulative. And that's really what ends up really crushing you. And when you get a carbon tax rebate, you don't get the full rebate, and not everybody gets it. And by that time, you've already spent more than whatever your rebate is. You never catch up with it. So it's absurd. And speaking of foreign interference, James Hansen, the US climate scientist, some months back was pushing Canadians to sign a petition for a $210 carbon tax, which he proposed would then be rebated to everyone at the first of the month on their debit card, which sounds to me a lot like UBI. And I'm wondering why this foreign interference from James Hansen. His specialty is supposed to be climate, not carbon taxes.
It sounds more like a pyramid scheme Just like get, you know, you
Yeah, it
get
is.
those scammer emails saying, "Oh, just send me this money, and I'll send you back $50,000 as soon as the Nigerian government unfreezes my bank account." That's outrageous.
Yeah.
Now, you also did a very horrific reading of the state of financial affairs of the Canadian economy,
Yeah.
and just the sheer impact the COVID lockdown and I think government's reactions had on the Canadian economy. And yet the solution seems so simple. We have, as you point out, over, I think it's trillions of dollars in wealth locked in Alberta, but
$21 trillion US.
$21 trillion US. So that's, $30 trillion in Canadian pesos. And yet the federal government doesn't even consider that when looking at the fiscal catastrophe that they're facing. Because I don't think they think it's a fiscal catastrophe. I think they think it's an opportunity, as they say.
Well, I think they're into the modern monetary theory, which I don't know a lot about, but I think the fundamental principle of it is just print more money, because then, and we'll call it fair. But yeah, going back to that monumental debt, I just pulled it up here. I'll just read a couple of things here. The federal government budgetary deficit rose from 5.6 billion in 2018 to 2019 to 312.4 billion in 2020 to 2021, which is an increase of 5,479%. Yeah, and in this video, we also give people some examples of how much money that is in terms, say, if we used units of time, like seconds. So, we're ending up with thousands of years of seconds of debt, to try and make it more tangible for people.
If you'd like to get access to my show, as well as other great TV style shows too, like Ezra's Nightly, Ezra Levant Show, and David Menzies' Friday night show, Rebel Roundup, just go to rebelnews.com/subscribe. That's rebelnews.com/subscribe.